In this tutorial, we're going to create a simple flying saucer with a CV curve and the Revolve Surfaces menu. Let's start out in an orthographic view, either the side or the front. Hold down your spacebar, go to Create, CV Curve Tools, and then go to the attributes for the CV Curve tool. Set it for 1, linear. We're going to start our path drawn against the vertical y-axis so that when we revolve it, there's no hole in the middle. Start to click and draw the shape you might have in mind. And once you've created the path you would like, hit return on the keyboard to set it, and it will turn green. Now, because our axis is against the y-axis of the viewport, that's for our path, we'll be able to revolve it exactly the way we want. Let's go to the perspective view so that when we revolve this, we can see the geometry in 3/4. I'll hold down the space bar, go to Surfaces, go to the Revolve attributes. In the Revolve attributes, we want to make sure that Y is selected, and then down towards the bottom, both quads and count. Usually the poly count is 200, and that'll be fine. Click Apply, and we have the basic geometry that we want. Now the next thing we need to do is put a texture on this. Right click on your newly made geometry and choose Assign New Material. Arnold, AI Standard Surface, and then right click, once again Material Attribute, name the attribute, name the node, hit return to set the name, and then under base, let's follow color out to the checkerboard pattern. If you don't see your checkerboard pattern immediately, select your geometry and hit 6 on the keyboard. Now I want to plot this with planar mapping. Select your geometry, hold down the space bar, go to UV, go to planar mapping, and choose the attributes. In the attributes, make sure Y is selected. Then hit Apply. If you were to go to your attributes in your channel window now, you'll notice that there is a number called projection width and projection height. We want to make sure that they're both the same exact number. So in this case, I'll make them both 22. The number is insignificant, it's just that they are both the same. Now if I look down on that spaceship, we can see that the checkerboard pattern does look like perfect squares of white and black, with the exception of where the cockpit is. I'm going to return to the object mode. Now we don't want the same pattern as the top on the bottom. The cockpit up here, this bubble, perhaps would be blue. In order to put a separate pattern on the bottom of our spaceship, we'll want to go to an orthographic view. Once again, the front or the side would do. I'm going to right click on my geometry and choose face. You'll want to select all the faces on the bottom that you would like to have a different texture on. Once we've done that, we'll return to UV, planar mapping, and once again we'll apply planar mapping on the y-axis. Once again in the channels box, I'll want the projection height and width to be 22. Return to your object mode for your geometry, and now we're going to go into the UV editor. Now the UV editor is a little green box with a checkerboard in it. If you don't see it on a dock, you can go to UV and click on UV editor. If you wish to put it on the dock so you can access it quicker, you can hold down Command Shift, go to UV, and click on UV editor. When I click on the UV editor, it shows my UV texture in the UV editor map. Now, we don't need a checkerboard pattern anymore, so I'll turn it off. And I'm going to zoom back a bit on my UV editor. I'll right click and choose UV shell, and I'll select one of the two shells that happens to be there. When I hit W, I can pull that out. And now I've got two, one for the top of the ship, one for the bottom. Now, in order to get this into Photoshop, both of these have to fit within that checkerboard area. So I'll shift select both of them, and if you can't select them, you can always re-click with your right mouse and choose UV shell, allowing you to shift select both. I need to scale it, so I'll hit R on the keyboard and I'll drag them down to make them smaller, and then I'll move them into the checkerboard area. Now, I may want to rotate these and put them in diagonally to optimize the texture a bit. Now, once I have both UV maps inside that checkerboard pattern, I can now export this out to Photoshop. In order to do so, though, I have to return to the object mode for my geometry and reselect it. I'll right-click, choose object mode, click off, and then reselect. And you'll see that now there's just the white lines. There's no brown on the polygon faces of your model. Inside the UV editor, I'm going to go to Image, UV Snapshot, and I'll direct this to a folder for my project. Once I've saved it, I'm going to make sure that my image format is a PNG, and the size is really very subjective. I'm going to make it 1024 by 1024, and I'll hit apply and close. Now we're ready to go into Photoshop, where we'll build a texture for this. Now I've opened up the UV map that we generated in Maya inside of Photoshop, and I've also got online, and I've gotten a texture I want to use as a metal plating for the surface of my flying saucer. I'm going to make a selection of metal plate that I got from online, hitting Command A, and I'll go to Edit Copy, and then we'll go and paste. We'll need to scale this down. I'll hit Command T, and I'll hold the Shift key and scale this down so it's much smaller. Now at this point, all this becomes very subjective based on the texture that you'll want to apply to your flying saucer. Now that I've scaled down my texture, I'm going to make a pattern out of it so I can just fill the entire UV map with this metal plating. I'll hit M on the keyboard to get my marquee, making sure I've got the rectangle marquee. I'll make a very precise selection around just the 4 plates in this instance. I'll go to Edit and Define Pattern. Now you'll get a menu and you don't have to name it, you can just click OK. I'm going to deselect, and I'm also going to make a new layer because when we put a pattern in a Photoshop file, it covers up whatever layer happens to be selected. Which means if I want to go in and change the scale of my original pattern, I would lose it because the new pattern would cover it over. So to that end, I'm going to click on a new layer. I'll now go to Edit, and I'll go to Fill, and under Contents, I'm looking for the term Pattern, and under Custom Patterns, the very last entry will be what I just defined. And when I click OK, it fills the whole texture. Now I'm going to move the UV map up to the top, and I'm going to hit Command S to save out the newly made texture. Back in Maya, I'll select my geometry, and we'll go to Material Attributes. And under our material attributes, we'll want to break the connection of the checkerboard pattern. Right-click on the word Colors and choose Break Connection. Follow the Color tab back out to the Render Node window. Choose File, and follow the yellow folder out to where your texture may be, and apply it. And you'll see it's applied that texture to my spaceship. Now we can go back into Photoshop and we can customize this. What I'm going to do is go into Photoshop and maybe put blue on top and perhaps change the scale of my metal plates and then come back. Now all this is, from here on, is really up to you and it's your choice.